Maple, cherry, cherry mahogany? How do you know what set of shells is right for you? If you're thinking of ordering a DW collector's kit, be sure to consider these things before placing that order. First, let's talk about tone woods, because that's the most important thing to select. That's as opposed to grain orientation. You'll find out that grain orientation is, for the most part, tightly coupled to the tone wood you select. So we're going to pick the tone woods first. DW, they currently offer over a dozen different configurations, combinations of tone woods between what they call their pure lines, which is selecting one wood, and their hybrid lines, which is selecting more than one wood. With so many different options, your thought process going into this should really be like this. What kind of sound, what kind of tone are you looking to get out of those drums? And from there, select one single tone wood that you want that represents that sound. And you can narrow things down based on that one tone wood. Note, I'm not saying to select based on the pitch, high pitch or low pitch. That again goes back to grain orientation. For example, before I had my DW kit, my earlier kit had maple mahogany shells. Now, I love the sound of those maple mahogany drums, especially the toms. I had played on drum sets that my friends had as well. Their drums were usually maple drums, and I felt that, yes, my drums were maybe lower in pitch, but that the tone was kind of deeper as well. Remember, drums, they don't emit a simple sine wave, okay? So there's going to be some natural blend of different highs, mids, and lows that get created. And mahogany tends to have bit more emphasis on the lows that get produced as opposed to maple. And so this was my starting point. I wanted mahogany again on my to-be-ordered DW kit. That allowed me to cut the options down by more than half. The next question was, which wood did I want paired with the mahogany? After listening to a ton of sound samples, which I highly recommend you do, I decided to go with cherry mahogany toms, which makes these even warmer than my previous drums. If you really wanted the sound of mahogany, you should take the same approach. Start off with the wood that initially sinks to you the most, be it maple or cherry or whatever. Decide on that wood and then narrow down your options based on what has that wood. And then do some very critical listening to compare all of the different shells, be it hybrid or pure, and narrow it down to the one that sings to you the most. If at that point you still need to narrow things down further, then think about how you're going to tune the drums, if you're going to tune them high or tune them low. And that's where things like VLT or HVLT will come into play. If you're looking at a pure maple shell, but you want to tune them lower, then consider the VLX Plus shells. Or if you want to tune your drums even lower than that, consider the purple core shells. Thinking about going higher pitch, then maybe look at the Santa Monica maple shells. Now, while I was really digging the sound of cherry on toms, I actually didn't like it at all on the bass drum. I was listening to samples from pure cherry, cherry mahogany, and purple core cherry, and they all seemed to have the same weird mids that were ringing out, or at least to my ears they did. I was also considering the bass drum to be a bit of a different beast than the toms, and the sound that I had in my head was I wanted to be able to have it tuned low, but also have a good amount of attack. Based on that, I ended up going with the purple core maple shell on the bass drum. Those purple core shells, they can all be tuned really low, so I was considering a purple core mahogany as well, but when I compared the mahogany and maple versions of them, at least to my ears, I felt that the maple had much better attack. So really be certain to consider these things, the actual sound and the tone that's going to be generated from those shells, not just some cool factor about the different woods or some fancy lettering on the grain orientation. Also keep in mind, you are not locked in to the same tone woods for each drum. In fact, if you really wanted to, every single drum, each tom could use a different wood or a different combination of wood. You may want to consider a different tone for your snare as well. This is actually a pretty common thing when you consider that people sometimes get metal or solid shell snares. But again, just start off by thinking of what is the type of sound you want. something warmer, something with more attack. In practice, you're probably going to say, do I want metal or wood or something in between? What is something in between? Well, think about the edge drums that DW makes, which is a piece of metal and then a piece of wood and then a piece of metal. You could also think about Purple Heart, which is actually what I got from my snare. Now, Purple Heart is a wood. It's a very, very hard wood. And it's said to have some metallic properties to it. Now, personally, I actually hate metal snares. I always avoid them. Had been using a maple shell for a long time. I wanted to try something a little different, but something that still has some warmth from wood. And the Purple Heart, I thought, had a really good, just a lot of volume, had a lot of character to it. And I definitely could hear some of those metallic properties. Very stuff going on the very high frequencies, but it was very slight. I thought it was adding to the character as opposed to it being really overpowering to me when it's just a pure metal shell. There are also some really important things to know before you get your kit set up for the first time, and you can find out more about that right over here. Until next time, peace.